Welcome to Rally the Cause, a podcast where we learn from top leaders and marketing experts in the nonprofit world. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hi, everyone. It's Jeff Rum. I'm the host of the Rally the Cause podcast, where I talk to top leaders and experts in the nonprofit community, as well as their journeys. This episode is brought to you by Ignite. Ignite is a full-service agency focused on branding, campaigns, and digital marketing for nonprofits and mission-driven organizations. At Ignite, we're strategists, we're storytellers, and we partner with nonprofits that have big ideas and bold visions for the future. Ultimately, we help nonprofits raise money and mobilize their audience. If you think we can help your organization, you can go to igniteaction.co, or you can email me directly at jeff@igniteaction.co to get in touch, and we can see how we can help. And today's guest, I want to introduce you to Tucker Wannamaker. He's the founder and chief impact officer of Thrive Impact. Thrive Impact's core mission is to solve the nonprofit leader burnout problem. For the last 10 years, Tucker has been in the trenches of nonprofits at the leader inside of Ashoka, Character.org, and Youth Service America. As a founder of a startup nonprofit, leading them to $1 million in revenue in the first year, and developing change management, fundraising, and marketing campaigns for nonprofits like the Red Cross, United States Olympic Museum, Pikes Peak Community Foundation, and Colorado College. His expertise is in revenue creation, marketing strategy, strategic partnerships, philanthropic management, technology platforms, culture upgrading, and managing creative teams. Welcome, Tucker.
Well, hello, Jeff. It's good to see you.
What an intro.
More importantly, I'm a dad of 4 kids and happily married for 17 years. So
that's amazing. That is more important.
I also drive a Vespa. That's fun too. A little bit more about it.
That's great. And where are you? Where are we talking to you from?
Well, I am in currently snowy Colorado. We had a 70-degree spring day yesterday, and now we got 2 inches of snow outside. You know, welcome to springtime in Colorado. But I'm in Denver. I'm in the Denver area.
Great. All right, Tucker, I want to just dive right in because we had a nice conversation before this episode, and tell me, like, what is the leader burnout problem that you talk about at Thrive?
That's a loaded question. You know, I
like to start with loaded questions.
I know. I like how you just dive right in, Jeff. It's great. I think that, Kevin Hagan and I, he's the co-founder with me, and he used to be the CEO of the American Diabetes Association. Before that, he was the CEO of Feed the Children. And it was interesting as we were talking about this that, he came from real big institutional nonprofits. I come from small, scrappy nonprofits. And we both had a similar story about being burned out ourselves, actually. And having so much, frankly, passion towards a mission, and then many times running into such organizational or cultural or sometimes even systemic issues that, as we were exploring what it was that we even wanted to call this organization, we were like, what pain are we really trying to solve here? And there's, of course, the 3 main things that keep most nonprofit leaders up at night, which is revenue, their board, or their leaders and staff and culture. But what we really realized was what's underneath all of that surface is that we're actually helping solve the pain of loneliness. That there is a lot of loneliness in this space. And I can attest to that as a head of fundraising, for example, that, I'm kind of stuck in this middle ground between all of our programs, and as if I needed to pull out some money rabbit out of a hat, these outsized expectations that I was like, wait a second, like money doesn't appear. Like, that's not how fundraising works. It's actually a whole system of how it works. Or if you think about it from a CEO or an ED perspective, like, you're kind of this linchpin between a board and a staff, and you're constantly in this place sometimes, that the structure forces you to be in performance mode all the time, but you can't really process, and practice your voice and with people who not only have empathy for you, like true empathy because they understand, like they've been there, but also authority in a way that like some actual ways and strategies to be able to help find your path forward. And so that's where what we realize is, we like to call it the medicine and the cheese, but the cheese is really helping people find pathways around their revenue, around, which is definitely a big topic, around their boards. Like, why is it that most nonprofit leaders feel like their boards are like necessary evils in the world? Like that's a problem. And then also just figuring out culture shifts of why do we even call ourselves a nonprofit in the first place? What is our culture of revenue in the organization? How many nonprofit leaders feel like they have these, they set out to do a strategic plan, and then it's like working uphill the whole way because they haven't actually addressed any of the culture issues and helping people co-create that stuff, co-create how we might work together. But underneath again is the medicine, which is like, how might we create a space that allows for nonprofit leaders to connect and thrive together so that they can create the impact that their communities need from them? Because when we're in, I don't know if you've ever experienced this, Jeff. I don't know, you can test this. Have you ever been burned out before, Jeff? Have you ever been in that space where you're like,
oh yes,
I'm fried, right?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if this was how it was for you, but when I've been in that space, I'm in survival mode. Right? I'm just trying to protect, and like when you're in survival mode, to use the work of a wonderful neuroscientist named Dr. Daniel Friedland, who I went through an amazing training that he did called About Being a Conscious Leader. He said, when we're in survival mode and when we feel like the resources on our time outweigh the demands that are on us, it sends us into spirals of reactivity, and it creates stress and self-doubt in our lives. And I don't know about you, but I've felt that when we're in survival mode and we're not thriving, we're in reactive mode. And when we're in reactive mode, we're actually not able to create proactive solutions around impact for the very people that we're trying to serve in the first place. And so to me, thriving is a direct correlation to creating the impact that we all set out to have in the first place. So that's why we're setting out to do this, is because it's needed to be done, both on the one-on-one individual level and on the systemic level around how we even structure nonprofits in the first place.
It's so refreshing to hear you say that, because I talk to so many nonprofit leaders that do in fact feel lonely, and I think are constantly pushing things out just to protect themselves. So the fact that you're able to articulate that and build a company around helping people that are in those situations, it's really awesome. So keep doing what you're doing. I know there's a lot to solve, but it's great that you're stepping up and trying to do that. So you talked about revenue being like a core element of any nonprofit. What is revenue's role? Like, what do you see as revenue's role in an organization, other than what probably most people think of it as? But I think you have some other thoughts around that.
Yeah, well, I'll go back to the very word that we've been using, which is the word nonprofit, right? Like, why the heck do we even use that word in the first place? And it's a complete, like, it's an old word that I hope one day that we'll be able to change. But the bottom line is that a nonprofit is not a business model; it's a tax status. Like, meaning I need to have, just like my family's budget needs to have profit, quote unquote, aka I need to make more than I spend. A nonprofit needs to actually have as much profit as possible. It's just that the motive around that profit is different, right? We don't have shares at a nonprofit, for example. Nobody owns, quote unquote, the nonprofit, where, like there's no like 50-50 owner of sorts, right? And so, but the motive around what that revenue does is totally different. The motive is around the mission, right? It's around creating this positive change, and that what makes a great nonprofit, of course, is not its ability to create profit, but its ability to create impact, true positive change that we can measure, that we actually know is happening. And so, honestly, I go to the very basic of why we even say nonprofit in the first place. Like, why would we describe ourselves by what we're not, first of all? Second of all, we actually do need to have profit. Like, literally, we need profit. I mean, call it whatever you want. we tend to use the word sustainability, right? The sustainability of our organization to sustain the impact, because none of us set out to have an unsustainable organization. But revenue's role in the organization, I mean, there's the old fundraising adage of no money, no mission. And it's true. Like, passion is a currency and you can use that for a little while. But at the end of the day, if you want to create a sustainable organization, and more specifically sustainable impact, which is, I'm guessing, why most people set out to work in nonprofits in the first place, then you have to address the revenue issue, and you have to figure out not only like the strategies around revenue, but your mindset around revenue. And I love it when we do, like, we have a workshop that we do called the Revenue Energizer Workshop. And a lot of it is to help address the culture of revenue. What is it that we believe is revenue? What are our beliefs that shape how we act? And I know that we did one once, and we had them reflect on their own words. It's not like we don't come in and tell people answers. Like, we're not consultants. We tend to stay far away from that word because that has an implication. Like, our job is to come in and provide answers. Because what we do is we help frame up your own words, frame up conversations that you reflect on your own understanding, your own behavior, your own thinking, because self-discovery tends to be the best form of discovery. And so we did this workshop, and people were reflecting on, like, we did a survey at the very beginning. We did a quick framing around paradigms and beliefs and how they shape our whole thinking, and then had them reflect on what is it that you see in your organization, and you're based on your own words that you use. And this is a leadership team of an organization. And after they came out of their small group of talking with one another, they realized that they have a belief of, fundraising is like this side thing over here, right? There's like, we have this belief of fundraising is like somebody else does that.
Right.
Well, that's a problem, because technically, everybody's a part of the revenue machine, right?
Yeah.
If I don't have, when I was the head of fundraising at Youth Service America, I had to figure out, like, again, I don't pull money rabbit out of a hat. Like, that's not how it works. So where does the money come from? Well, my job is to package something up, which means that I need the program people to be dialed in. I need them to be able to help me articulate what impact we're creating. I need to grab stories from them that help package this up for a donor, for a corporation, for whomever it is that I'm working with, right? This is a whole system that works together where we're all involved in the money machine, in the revenue machine, to create the impact that we need. But they were reflecting on their own words and realizing, oh, wow, we have created, based on our own beliefs, we have created a silo. And poor Kevin was his name. Kevin, who was the head of fundraising for that organization. Kevin was on the call. He was like, thank you all for just sharing that, because I felt that way. Right? And it was a beautiful moment, because it was this reflection on themselves of, we've treated revenue poorly. I remember talking to another organization that we were prepping for this revenue workshop, and I was asking them, like, what do you all believe, you do believe about revenue? And one of the VPs, this is a larger organization, one of the VPs said, I was talking to some of our frontline workers, and she said, somebody literally called revenue evil, right? Like, they didn't even know. And these are frontline workers who were like frontline direct with people and their beneficiaries on a regular basis, not understanding. And in fact, not only not understanding, but seeing the opposite side of what revenue's role is, which is like, it's evil for us even to talk about. I mean, and so you get this spectrum of belief that messes us all up. And it starts with the fact that we call ourselves nonprofits, it's like, we need to get into a better and a more right relationship with money when it comes to our
amazing what language can do, right? Like, just the way people speak about things, the language they use, and their perceptions of that really could change the outcome, right?
Yeah.
And what they believe is truth.
Totally.
Fascinating. So I've heard you talk about the impact cycle.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about what that means and how that relates to revenue and just the whole mission of, like, getting people out of this burnout cycle? Is the impact cycle part of that?
Yeah, totally. Can I draw you a little picture, Jeff?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
I do love drawing pictures. So, so this is actually something that, going back to what I was sharing earlier, is I had developed this when I was at Youth Service America, because what I was trying to help our whole organization, including myself, understand my role within the organization. And so it's very straightforward, which is every nonprofit has a program, right? You have an intervention strategy that you're trying to do to solve pain in the world, right? You do something to help solve somebody's pain.
Yep.
But that has to lead into impact. And these are different things. There's a great book by Robert Lupton called Toxic Charity. I recommend anybody reading that, which is, he says something like he said something like doing for others what they could be doing for themselves is the kindest way to destroy people, right? And he uses this point around, if we don't have any idea of what change we're creating, whether positive or negative, frankly, and we're just doing our programs because we think that that's good work, we're totally missing the boat.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, we could be creating toxicity and destroying people, and we have no idea that it's even happening, right? And so if we don't create this sense of what positive change, what indicators of positive change are we creating in the space around us, then we're not fulfilling what it is that we set out to do. And this is what makes a great nonprofit, its ability to create impact. But that has to then go into what I call story. Sometimes I call this packaging too. But story is a little easier, so we just say story. This program and the impact needs to be packaged up, told. The story needs to be told. Whether that's literal storytelling like videos, or that's packaging up like your donor community program, or a corporate program, or whatever, right? It all just needs to be packaged up for people to be able to experience it in order for us to bring in revenue. And then that continues the cycle. So that's sort of the cycle. And then in the middle of this is culture that helps sort of drive the flywheel. And so one of the reasons why I had helped create this, in fact, this was me digging into Charity Water back in the day. Of course, one of the lighthouses of nonprofits. In fact, Charity Water's vision, their mission is clean water, but their vision is reinventing charity, which I loved it. It was so fascinating to me.
That is fascinating.
But what was interesting for me is realizing that when I came onto YSA, there was a at that point in time, they had 5 years worth of a decline in revenue. And so, of course, when I come on, my job is to figure out, well, why did that happen? So revenue was drying up. What happened here? And so what I realized was I had to go backwards in the cycle. Like, where was our story and our packaging not working? Did we not actually have any clear impact? Did we even have any programs that were even monetizable, if you will?
Mm-hmm.
So when revenue is an issue, we have to go backwards in the cycle to explore what is it that's slowing us down. And when it came to YSA in particular, what I discovered is that we had great programs, but we weren't clear about the impact that was having. So, for example, with Youth Service America, we told all these stories about our job was to activate young people in service and volunteerism. And what was great was, we had all these amazing stories of young kids. Like, I remember she was 6 years old. Her name was Chloe, and she started Save the Sea Turtles. And it was just this beautiful story of like Chloe rallying her community to save sea turtles, right? And we had thousands of those stories. But what was interesting, and what was interesting and deceptive about those stories was that we had no idea what impact they were actually creating, because we had no efficacy around, like, what was the sea turtle problem in the first place, right? And kids were involved in all kinds of service projects: literacy, homelessness, sea turtles. I mean, you name whatever passion that a kid could find and work on a service project, they were involved in it. And we had no efficacy around, the hundreds of different things that a kid could be involved in. So what did we have the ability to measure when it came to our impact? And what we realized was in our programs is that when young people are involved in high quality youth-led service projects, according to research that was not even our own research, by the way, but when they're involved in high quality and youth-led, these were like the qualifiers, they develop the skills that employers are looking for. The 4 C's, the critical thinking, collaboration, creativity, and communication skills, the soft skills, quote unquote, right? And when they're involved in these types of service projects, they develop those skills according to research. And we were in a place where we were helping kids be involved in these programs. And so the stories we were telling were stories of cute kids doing service projects, which was great, except for it was deceptive because nobody would, while everybody would say, oh, that's so great. What a great story. Why was our funding drying up?
Mm-hmm.
Like people weren't funding. And, and Youth Service America had Disney as one of their corporate partners. Like this wasn't some, rinky dink nonprofit, if you will. Like there was some heft here, and yet our revenue was drying up. And so we really went on a journey together as a team of clarifying what is my role? Because as a fundraiser, I'm over in this side of the world.
Mm-hmm.
But I need these guys to work with me and us collectively come up with what is it that we not only do, but what impact are we creating? And so we were able to put together a story that actually brought in real revenue and changed the trajectory around YSA. And so we use this impact cycle as a structure, as a compass and also a diagnostic tool of what is it that's going on in our revenue that means we need to make the adjustments that we need in order for us to actually bring in the revenue that we need to be sustainable.
Yeah, and I think when you draw it out like that, it's clear that yes, the sea turtles are being helped, which is great. With the real impact is on those kids and the future of the world, because those are going to be the future leaders. So the story becomes much bigger and the impact becomes much greater. And that's what I see from you defining that. That's great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You mentioned charity water. Charity water, I think for all of us in this field is like the lighthouse, right? Like you said, it's like, if we could all just be like charity water, what is it about? I know, Ben Green is their chief development officer. What is Ben and his team doing right? What are they doing right? And what can you learn? What do you learn from them? And what can others learn from an organization like Charity Water?
Totally. Well, I mean, you can't talk about Charity Water without talking about its founder, Scott Harrison. And, one of the big reasons why their vision is to reinvent charity is because what he realized and discovered was that there was such a lack of trust from donors, right? Not trusting where their money goes. Because generally speaking, I assume the best and the deepest best of people, which is that they give because they want to create impact. I mean, all of us, if we look at our own lives, right? If anybody have given anything, I remember when we started Wildfire Tees, it was this t-shirt nonprofit to raise money. That was the one that you mentioned about we raised $1 million or, in the first year. As, we were trying to democratize philanthropy where everybody could feel a part. And if anybody has ever given even a small sum of money, we want to know that that's doing something, right? Otherwise, why are we giving it? Maybe we're giving it because a friend of ours, but maybe that doing something is helping our friend, and so that's the impact. But at the end of the day, it's like when we give, we want it to do something, create positive change. It's why, generally speaking, there's other reasons like tax things and whatever, but generally speaking, underneath the surface of all that is, at the end of the day, is to use the work of a psychologist, the late psychologist. Dr. Alfred Adler, he talked about humans want two main things in their lives. They want belonging and they want significance. I actually read this in a parenting book because I have 4 kids, as I mentioned. And, Jeff, I know you have some kids. You have 3, right?
3, yes.
Yeah.
Not quite at your level.
Yeah,
but
that's all right. No, we're all in the same boat, my friend. But he was saying that in this parenting book in particular, it was interesting because he was saying, like, when our kids are acting up or when there's something, that there's usually one of those 2 issues are feeling threatened. And what was fascinating for me to think about that from a donor perspective is, and this is one of the things that Charity Water did so incredibly well and still does well, is they created a donor community, a space of belonging, connecting with each other, and a very clear, transparent, direct line of impact, which is the significance. And if I look at the things that Scott and Ben have and their whole team over there have been doing so well, is they have created a platform of trust and transparency around with the donors that they work with. And that's why, Charity Water is famous, or in some circles infamous, but I think it's totally famous for their 100% model. And the reason why, speaking of reinventing charity, one of the reasons why I love what they did is because it's so innovative, which was helping create real structure of the whole organization around helping people fund the things that they want to fund. right?
Mm-hmm.
So they have a major donor community called the Well. The Well funds all of their operations. And typically the people who are in the Well, who are typically more sophisticated donors many times, or they're like investor types, and they understand the value of infrastructure for an organization to be able to thrive.
Yeah.
And so they created literally something that funds just that. And the language they even use ROI language, like, and it's not a return on their, like, they're not getting a financial return, but they're like, and I don't remember the exact number, so don't quote me on this, but I remember looking back at some of their old, I think it was annual reports or some of the things that they were doing when they were first building the Well. They had calculated some of the return. Like if somebody gives $5, that means this much in return on their other side of their nonprofit, which is their 100%. Is that when we're able to have people invest in our infrastructure, that allows us to go fully with the public, that 100% of your dollar goes directly to impact.
Yeah. And I see a lot of nonprofits are doing the opposite now. They're trying to get most of their funding to go for the infrastructure and for the day-to-day expenses of running the organization.
Yeah.
And the project work is maybe 20% of the funding goes to specific projects. The rest go to general, kind of general funds. So it is an interesting thing. And I think on the other end of the spectrum with Charity Water, they have something called the Spring, which is their community of monthly givers, small monthly givers. Yep. And they even feel like they're part of a community because they get impact updates every month about what their monthly gift is going towards. So you have the Well on one end, the Spring on the other. And I think it's a really nice way of redefining what a charity does. And totally. Like you talked about it, the nonprofit structure has to change in order for it to thrive.
Yeah. So, so Ben, we were able to, I was very honored to be able to interview him at some of our recent workshops that we do. And, he had said something, these were his three of his bullet points that I really appreciated. One was, finding connection to your mission, that if you're working with people who aren't actually connected to your mission, it's ultimately going to be a waste of time for your organization. So keep digging and exploring with people and discovering what matters to those people. It's a very empathetic approach, which is great. He talked about, of course, building trust, which is how do you establish trust? And that's through transparency. That's through, I like to call it closing the impact loop, right? When they give, then what happens after that? You have to close that impact loop, because the reason, again, going back to what I said a minute ago, believing that the main reason why people give is because they want to create impact. And when you don't follow up with what impact they created, not because you gave to us, we were able to, but no, you were able to do this. And if you don't follow that up, if you don't close that impact loop with people, you're stealing their joy, frankly. In fact, I was talking to a community foundation yesterday, and they were talking about pains of their donors, because they, community foundation have a lot of donors, right?
Yeah.
In terms of like their fiduciary, their things like that. And I'm reading this, literally, I wrote this down. She said, I was talking to this donor the other day. She said, once they know that we give, it all of a sudden turned transactional. It turned into this, like, they were just hitting us up for money and not getting to know who we are. They said, nothing we ever did was enough. Like, has anybody ever been in that situation? It's terrible. Like, we kept getting hit up and whatever we gave was just never enough. We had this ongoing feeling like people feel like it's never enough. Well, you can give more, almost kind of a sense. They also said that people were not being honest with us. They were like our yes people, right? We'd bring an idea and we're just bringing ideas because we're wanting to be a part of a collaborative type of effort, and immediately when we had an idea, people were like, oh yes, oh, that's a great idea. Oh yes. And it was like, I don't think people are being honest with me. These were real pains verbalized to this CEO of a community foundation. Like, we talk about a frame called the Pain Joy Bridge, which is our job as a nonprofit, similar to the Impact, is to create joy. Like, people have pain, and our job is to build the bridge into their joy. Well, that's not only for the beneficiaries of our work, like in our case at YSA, as the young people, but it's also for our donors.
Yeah.
What pain are they experiencing, and what joy might we bring them?
It's interesting in that. Yeah. No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, and that's just what I love about what Charity Water has done. is actually let me mention the last point that he said. His last point, which really struck me, was remove friction. And I loved it because, you know, he used like Donald Miller from StoryBrand, if you confuse, you lose. And I always love that statement. But like, how much friction do we have in the way because we're not empathetically thinking about the journey of a donor? He said, the faster you can remove friction, just make it easier for people to give to you by being clear about your own numbers, for example, making an easy process for them to engage, helping them have clear expectations about what it means to be a part of the spring or the well or whatever it is that you're wanting to do. When you can remove friction and think empathetically about that bridge that I actually just mentioned, how do we help them take step-by-step steps, you know, to come into their joy, you're going to really win with your donors. So
that's great. And I think it leads to just being more authentic, right? As an organization and being honest. You know, we say, I like your idea of bringing joy, because in the marketing world, we always talk about, you know, putting a lot of content out there, but not getting lost in the kind of the shuffle, right? Like there's so much content going out there. And I try to teach our team, when you're running, like whether it's a social media campaign or an email campaign or whatever it is, I try to follow the 80-20 rule, which is 80% of the time you should be giving gifts to the people that you're communicating with, right? Like give them gifts, give them resources, give them words of inspiration, and 20% of the time you can ask them for a gift, right? But because usually what a lot of nonprofits do out there in the digital world is they do the opposite. They ask people for a gift 80% of the time, and maybe 20% of the time they'll send a holiday message or something. And if you flip it, it's fascinating. I've seen organizations raise more money.
Totally.
Just by giving gifts out into the world. Yeah. And it's exactly what you're talking about, just in a different capacity.
Well, and Jeff, what you're sharing is this part of this gets back into when I said the loneliness of fundraisers, is that, you know, and I mentioned this a couple of times, which is this sort of idea of, you know, just go find money, you know, and that comes out in all kinds of ways, that there are these outsized expectations many times because of the insecurity or the lack of understanding of what fundraising is from the CEO or the ED or the board level, that it puts fundraisers in this really awkward position, that because we're here to package up something, like there's still an art and a craft, and it is a profession, literal profession of fundraising. And part of that profession is building a bridge between the nonprofit and the donors. Right. And as one of our coaches says, Gloria says, you know, we're the broker of dreams. Right. I love that because it takes real strategy. It takes real empathy, and it actually takes a lot of you have to let your ego at bay, because you're creating a bridge. And one of the times, a lot of what I've experienced this firsthand, but I've also seen the loneliness in fundraising is that we put way too much pressure on fundraisers. In fact, I don't remember the current stat, but it's something like the average tenure of a fundraiser is like 18 months or something like that. It's terrible.
Wow.
And it's gotten worse, of course, since the pandemic. And what I think about that is not only what do we need to do as fundraisers ourselves to be able to be in a better scenario and situation, be more conscious leaders ourselves, but what are the systemic structures that are creating this oppression in some respects, to be honest, that are these outsized expectations without clarity of what it takes to actually get this job done. And so that's one of the things that we're passionate, honestly, about at Thrive, which is how do we really professionalize this space, not only for the professional fundraisers themselves, but also for the structure at Bay that we're all involved in as a whole, and helping leaders across the board understanding how revenue actually comes about and all the different things that we can do. So that way we can create spaces where fundraisers are able to hone their craft. They're able to dig in. Like I was talking to one of our coaches, Serena. She's the VP of development for the Denver Museum of Science and Nature. And she was saying that literally, I just had a call just before this. And she was saying that there's so much, because we don't have diversified revenue streams and there's just too much on our plates. We're not able to really hone our craft. She said, I can't tell you how much time I spend. She in tax law. I was like, it was awesome, right? Because I need to know sophisticated giving mechanisms, because that's the space. And she deals mostly in transformational gifts. I mean, she manages a whole team too, but she is an expert in major donors and transformational gifts. She's like, I need to go deep. I need to understand how these giving structures are at work and are at play. And so how do we create that space that professionalizes the space, that fundraisers are professions, not just these, you know, you talked about those beliefs that we talked about. We're like, oh yeah, just you go do the fundraising stuff. Like, but it's diminishing of the role that is, because we actually create magic and the ability for us to have a sustainable organization in the first place. And so how do we get the resources that are needed for us to do that as fundraisers?
Tucker, I'm going to call you the broker of dreams now. We'll steal that from Gloria.
Broker, that's right. Gloria, she's awesome.
So before we go, I just want to ask you, you mentioned, you're out in Colorado, you have 4 kids. Obviously you're working hard. You're leading this company. What do you do? What's your daily ritual that you do every day that kind of sets you in place, keeps you from being lonely and keeps you passionate about the work you do?
That's a great question. There was a podcast I started listening to a long time ago called Community Made by a guy named Jason Gaynard. And he had this statement that I use all the time now, which is we are not self-made, we are community made. And the pain of loneliness is a real pain that all of us deal with. I mean, the pandemic has only exacerbated that in many ways. And in fact, there was a study that was done through, I think it was in the Harvard Business Review, but it was, I don't remember the exact quote, the exact numbers outside of the loneliness number, but it was something about the effect of loneliness on our longevity, literally how long we live, right? And it was like obesity is like reduces our longevity by 30%, smoking by 40%, alcohol by 50%, or something like that. It was smoking, obesity, and alcohol were the 3, and it was like 30, 40, 50. And then loneliness reduces our longevity by 70%. 70%. Like, it kills us, literally. And so,
shocking in a way.
Yeah, it's like this under the surface thing that we're like, wait a second, I'm just lonely. This is why, it really spoke to us, especially since we set out to thrive to solve the pain of loneliness. Like, right. And it sounds a little weird when you first say it, like, as if it's like kumbaya or something, like we just all need to get together, but, to answer your question about what I do, I'm part of communities that I don't feel like I have to perform. I'm a part of spaces. For example, there's a facilitation community I'm a part of called Exchange, and it's been transformational for me. That's where I got the medicine and the cheese analogy too, right? Their cheese is about facilitation, right? We do a lot of facilitation, very interactive connections and choreographing of conversations, and through the use of questions and interactions and activities and games and things like that, because we found that that's how people learn, right? That's why we do it. But what I've discovered is this beautiful community of people. In fact, we were talking about our core values in the community. We were co-creating our core values as a part of the community. And somebody said, joy is not the price of admission here. Meaning, I don't have to have all my shit together. Sorry, I don't know if I can say that or I don't have to have it all. I don't have to have it all together in order for me to show up at an experience or a gathering or whatnot. I can just show up and be me. And so that is one of the things, especially as I've reflected on the last year, of being a part of this community over a year and a half now, or almost a year and a half, has been the deep value of investing in community for yourself. And I have done that. We've done that through other places too, like not only in the professional side of the world, but also in I'm part of a faith community, or I have been, and we just moved to Colorado actually back in September, and we're still exploring. But I've learned we were facilitators of a community group at our house for 3 years or something like that. And investing in those safe spaces that we're able to process and connect in a real way where we feel safe is immensely valuable. So that's one huge thing that I would recommend to anybody is to find that and invest in those communities, because they will return to you dividends of what you're looking for.
Wow.
And then I think the other thing, and I'm still learning this, honestly, but I'm still learning the act. Like, I'm an extrovert. We moved to DC a while ago. We lived in DC. That's how I know you, Jeff, right? In the first place.
Yeah.
We lived in DC for about 7 years. And I remember that being a journey of learning how to be an introvert, which was appreciating quietness and solitude. And not that all introverts, that's just what they do, but you know what I'm saying? Like, appreciating that space. And I had this stream that I went to, and I love nature. Like, nature's a big deal for me. But I had this stream that I went to regularly that I would just sit and think. I would pray, I would process. And I grew to just appreciate that. And I'm honestly still learning that, because I'm so extroverted and external oriented.
Yeah.
That when I find myself, I look for indicators that I'm getting stressed out. Like, I'll get critical sometimes. That's an indicator to me. Oh, I need to back up. I need to pause and slow down a little bit.
Mm.
Like, I'm just trying to be more aware of the indicators that I'm getting more disintegrated, or I'm in that cycle of reactivity that I talked about earlier, as opposed to like, okay, let me connect with the community and let me pause and spend some time in meditation and reflection. So those are some of the things that I've been working on, and it's a learning journey. But those are things that I've been really working on and investing in as much as I can.
Yeah, it's great advice, I think, also for fundraisers, because what I hear a lot from especially community-based fundraisers is they feel like they live it 24/7, right? Like, they go to the grocery store, they run into donors. They go, even in their
Yes.
faith-based spaces on the weekend, they run into donors. So where do you go to like get where you could just be yourself and not feel like you're constantly having to show up and perform, like you said? I think that's a really great point. I hope everyone can find a stream somewhere. You can find one in Colorado, and we can all find them, whether it's in our backyards or somewhere where we could just go and think. And it's a really important piece.
Well, and that's why, we have a community that we've been building called Thrivers, and that's a community around fundraisers and EDs, particularly to have that space. And not only have we seen from an impact perspective, like, we're mission driven, it's all about impact for us. Like, are we solving the nonprofit leader burnout problem? And we're discovering that we are, by creating the rhythms, we call it the coaching, the consistency. No, the community, the coaching, and the consistency that you need to be a thriving nonprofit leader. And so, and we've been finding that not only are people increasing their revenue, but even more importantly, they're like, I have a safe space that I can practice my voice. Like somebody said, we share wins every single week, and there was one week in particular that they all shared something about, and they all used the word confidence. And I was like, well, just explore it. Tell me why. What was that? And they said, because we have a place to practice our voice in this community. And so it's been a joy to be able to help be a part of that and also build that. So that's a place for fundraisers and EDs to be a part if they want to be.
That's incredible. Tucker, I want to thank you for being here, for sharing with us. Tucker Wannamaker is the co-founder and chief impact officer of Thrive Impact. Where can people go if they want to learn more about you, about Thrive? What should they do?
Yeah, just go to thriveimpact.org. Pretty straightforward. And if you want to learn more about the Thriver community, you can go to thriveimpact.org/thrivers. And you can explore that a little bit more. But that's a good way to explore. Or just hit me up on LinkedIn. I mean, there are literally no other Tucker Wannamakers in the world. So I Googled it. So far I haven't found anybody. But just hit me up on LinkedIn. Happy to connect there.
I get it. There are no Jeff Rums in the world either. So
hey, nice.
You can find you can find us on LinkedIn. So it's all good.
I love it.
Tucker, thank you so much. This was great. I learned a lot. I'm sure everyone else who's listening learned a lot. And we'll catch up again soon. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Thanks for listening to Rally the Cause podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.